One more week of minicamp in the books and another chance for us to get eyes and ears on the Seahawks as reporters were allowed onto the practice field yesterday to watch the workout. Second time that has happened since voluntary minicamp opened last week. We learn a little bit more about Mike Macdonald each time we get to see this. We get to learn a little bit more about where players are lining up, who's healthy, who's here, who's not, news and notes coming out of camp. Start to see an identity forming, and it gives me a chance to provide you with some takeaways. I have watched the interviews. I have watched the tapes. I have scoured Twitter. I have read all the reports. My 5 Seahawks minicamp takeaways coming up next on today's show.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
That's me at Seahawks Forever on Twitter. Thank you for joining the show. Happy Blue Friday, last day of May, which means when we wake up tomorrow, it'll be June. Brilliant analysis. That's the kind of thing you get from me here on this channel. But what that means is that we will be one step closer to mandatory minicamp, which happens in the middle of June. And then we'll just be a month away from the start of training camp. It goes fast, right? We get into the summer routine. Kids are out of school. We go on vacation. The weather's nice here in the Pacific Northwest. And we're busier. And our minds aren't as focused on football. At least most of us aren't. And so time tends to go by faster. But we got another look at the team yesterday, and I'll give you my thoughts on that in just a moment. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell button so you always get notification of future episodes. On the audio side, anywhere that you prefer to get your podcasts, you can subscribe to the show there. If you're on Apple and you like what I do, be very kind of you to leave a review. On Spotify, you can at least leave a rating. That certainly helps the show. You can buy me a coffee or a beer at the link down below. Or you can hear ad-free episodes of the audio podcast on Spotify for a very low monthly fee. Once we get into the season, there will be more exclusive content to those subscribers, some audio-only episodes throughout the week. So good to get in now if you can. Let's do this. Let's get into these takeaways. I do not get to go on the field. I'm not a credentialed reporter, unfortunately. Not anymore. Those days are far, far behind me. In fact, it was interesting. I was having a conversation with someone the other day a coworker who lives in Kirkland. And she came up to me and because she knows that I do this and that I'm a big fan. And she said, did you know that there's this little college? Well, it used to be a Bible college. It's not anymore, but there's this little college in Kirkland. And someone said the Seahawks used to practice there. Did you know that? And I had to chuckle. I appreciated the enthusiasm. Yeah, I know it. I actually covered Ray Roberts' signing press conference there. Would go to training camp there, and when I was working in television at the time, and interviewed some people. And I haven't told this story on the air yet. I promised it last year, never fulfilled that promise. But this year, when training camp opens, I will tell you my training camp story about when I interviewed Dave Craig and what made that so unique and interesting. Yeah, I got to tell that story to Chuck Arnold and some of the guys at the Seahawks, and they got a kick out of it recently. Anyway, let's get into this. 5 takeaways. We're going to start first and foremost with the head coach, right? We're going to start at the top because we get a glimpse of his style now, and especially because we got from the Seahawks on their YouTube channel. Go check it out if you haven't already. Coach Macdonald mic'd up. And even he is the first to admit, he's talking to Julian Love early in the tape. It's about a 4.5 minute video. And he says, hey, just a heads up, I'm mic'd up. And Love kind of has a funny little quip. He says, oh, I'll text you then. But Mike said, yeah, they did this once in Baltimore. They only got like 30 seconds of usable content out of it. And they never asked me again. So yeah, it's, for all of the people who have, and there have been, it's been a very small minority of fans and analysts, but there's been a little bit of pushback that like, this guy's kind of dry. This guy's kind of vanilla, right? I've talked about it on the show before. I see a quiet confidence. I see a guy who knows who he is, who's sure of himself, And then the reputation he has built over his career as a teacher is what stands out as we watch these practices. You see it in the mic'd up stuff, but more so than that, it's being observed. Greg Bell, Tacoma News Tribune, been on the show, outstanding Seahawks beat reporter, commented on that aspect of it yesterday quite a bit. Mike Macdonald is a teacher, and you can see it. That there's some drills there that I'll put the tweets up here on YouTube if you haven't seen them yet. If not, go to Greg's timeline. You can see him there. That a lot of teaching going on. That was kind of the word of the day. That was the sense and the feel of this workout, is how he's involved in everything and he's teaching. And what I like, and you can glean a little bit of this from that mic'd up segment, is his communication style, his teaching style. He's very clear. He's very calm. It's a very relatable style. You can see how, as much as, players just loved Pete because he was just a character, right? And jokes all the time and just that incredible upbeat demeanor. Macdonald is much more measured. That's not the right word, because measured would imply that it's contrived, right? That it's calculated. It's just it's a calm demeanor. He's very confident in what he does. He's very comfortable with what he does. Maybe that's the word I'm searching for. It's a very comfortable expression that he uses to get his point across, and the way he interacts with players. And here's how I would compare and contrast that. You remember a couple of years ago, his last year at the Arizona Cardinals, when the Cardinals were featured on the in-season Hard Knocks thing, or I don't think, excuse me, it wasn't the actual Hard Knocks brand, but it was the Amazon thing that they did in season with the Cardinals. And seeing some of that locker room interaction with Cliff Kingsbury and his team, did you see any of that? It was cringy to watch. I remember commenting on it at the time. It was hard to watch. It just seemed so forced and contrived. It very similar to when you would see things, remember when Russell Wilson would be mic'd up on the sidelines, right? And he just kind of had his couple of go-to phrases that he would say over and over and over again. And he's just, the more you heard it, the more it just felt like a script. Kingsbury came across to me that way. And there have been other coaches I've seen throughout the years where it just seems like, I don't know, man. Felt that way about Jonathan Gannon, oddly enough, with the Cardinals. But the results on the field last year certainly look like he's a guy that does connect to the players, and that maybe just his public persona and demeanor, the way he comes across, just takes some getting used to. But with Macdonald, you can just see it just seems comfortable. That he's not one of those guys that's going to be out there screaming and yelling and slapping your pads. You can't do that anymore anyway. They don't wear pads anymore in practice. But he's out there teaching, and then his actions are going to establish over time his, the respect that he demands from players when it gets time to making decisions about who plays and who doesn't, and what happens when a guy struggles. Some of those things that over the years we saw some different approaches from Seattle coaches and Carroll and his staff in, maybe sticking with a guy too long, or maybe not giving another guy a chance that we feel like he deserves. Those things we're not going to know for a while, but just watching his interaction as he's installing these schemes and working with these players is very impressive. And as I watch it, it gives me, as a fan and an analyst, it gives me comfort. And then you hear him talk about the process and how they install just a little bit at a time until they master that aspect of the scheme, and then they add more. They don't throw too much at him. And then we hear other people that have reported on his history and that this is a consistent technique that he uses and something that's worked very well for him. And I think in this day and age in the NFL, I think that's what sets guys like Shanahan, McVay apart, is, first of all, the mental aspect and the scheme itself, and just the decisions they make within the flow of a game and in putting players in a position to succeed, but also communicating that, getting it through to players, and teaching it to them. And one thing that really stood out to me is his follow-up. You'll see him make a point, and he makes it in language that's very easy to understand for these players. And then he'll look at the player in the eye and say, does that make sense? You got that? And he gives the player a chance to say, oh, I'm not sure. And that did happen in one sense with, he was doing something with Kayvon Wallace. And he used the term Rob. And Wallace kept kind of coming back to him. He was a little bit confused. And it gave McDonald a chance to clarify it. And then Wallace realized, oh, I thought you were saying robber, which is different terminology. And he was able to get that in, as opposed to I've seen coaches run practice and they'll just spout out the command and walk away and just expect you to get it. And if you don't get it, well, that's on you. I don't know that approach is really going to work anymore with the modern athlete, right? So I like everything that I see and hear about his ability to teach, and it's something that really stands out. And it's the thing ultimately that I think we're going to judge this regime on when we get into the season, because I think most of us agree. And one of the most prominent narratives over the last couple of years of the Pete Carroll tenure was that we just didn't see the execution on the field. And then he'd come back the next week and try to explain it. And, well, we're not getting this right. We're not getting that right. Well, the teaching wasn't getting through. We can talk about maybe some shortcomings in talent on the roster too. But we also see teams succeed every year with lesser talent, but they're taught well. Rams are a good example last year. We didn't think that defense was going to be much outside of Aaron Donald, but they got a bunch of undrafted guys and low drafted guys and street free agents to play really well together because Raheem Morris really did an outstanding job of teaching and getting through to these guys. And that's what stands out to me. And I cannot wait to see the results of it. And it's not just McDonald. It's when you go out and hire staff, you're going to hire guys that are similar to you in what you want to accomplish, right? There's also a piece of video that Greg Bell shows of Scott Huff installing a run play and coaching the entire offensive unit on the run blocking schemes and the run fits, the running backs and the quarterbacks. And Bell himself, who's been doing this a long time, even commented, I've never seen an offensive line coach direct all the position groups in installing a play like this. Very, very cool to watch. I highly recommend you go watch that mic'd up stuff. It's not dynamic. It's not overly entertaining unless you're nerds like us. And I assume because you're watching the show that you are. But go check it out. It's pretty cool. Second takeaway, there's talent everywhere. And I know it's just, excuse me, it is just drills and it's on air. You can't hit, you can't contest the ball and those kinds of things. But you just see talent everywhere, and not necessarily in movement skills, but just volume. Like I'm watching, defensive line drills, my goodness. And just the depth there, the guys that we're excited about, right? The mainstays now, the foundational pieces, Leonard Williams, right? Uchenna Nwosu, I'll count in that group. Byron Murphy being added to that group, a young dynamic talent like that, Jonathan Hankins, keep forgetting about him, just what a solid pro he is and how much he's going to help in the interior and that run defense. But also you see a healthy Mike Morris out there running through drills. Missed his entire rookie year with the shoulder injury. And how excited were we last preseason about him in that frame, 6'5", 6'6". He was 305 at one point. They were going to play him inside. It kind of looks like there's a lot of guessing going on Twitter about what his current weight is, but it kind of looks like he might be closer to like 285 now than 300. And that might say something about how they plan to use him. Maybe more on the edge than on the inside. And then, a guy that we took in the 4th round last year that a lot of scouts said, was a junkyard dog and could really turn out to be a good, at least a rotational, contributing, regular, good, solid pro player in Cam Young. And no one's talking about him. But he's there. It's from where we were a year ago. I know I keep saying it, but it it blows me away. For all those years where we saw the Seahawks chasing certain position groups, remember forever trying to get edge rushers and pass rushers and having to make those moves and going to get Jadeveon Clowney and going to get Carlos Dunlap. And they just couldn't hit on those guys in the draft. And Darrell Taylor didn't really work out the way we thought he was going to. And although he's, still on the roster, still has a chance. And Alton Robinson, the injury, and that didn't work out. And just, it seemed like they were always working from behind in that group. And now you just layered, right? You think about what Boye Mafe could do in his third year and what Nwosu can do fully healthy in this scheme. And then listen to Jim Nagy in an interview the other day. I think it was on Locked On Seahawks. I always want to give credit. I think it was Corbin and Rob Rang interviewing him. And he said, he even just name dropped. He wasn't asked about him. He said, Derek Hall, don't forget about Derek Hall. Like in his second year, I think he's a perfect fit. And Mike McDonald's had a lot of success in his career with guys like Derek Hall. It just, the layers of talent. And then you look at that secondary, you need to see the players running around. And again, the depth and the layering, and even now looking forward, it seems so odd at the time, but the more I sit with it and the more I hear about these guys, again, Jim Nagy speaking at length about these guys because they both played at the Senior Bowl. But the selection of the two Auburn corners on day 3 in the draft this year, which didn't seem like an obvious need to us at the time, going into the draft, to the point that I hardly watched any corner film before the draft to prepare myself. But Nehemiah Pritchett, DJ James, taking those two guys, I think it's a stroke of brilliance. It really sets us up long-term. And you just see those guys running around. I saw Jonathan Sutherland, again, being heavily involved in drills in some of these videos. A guy who was an undrafted free agent out of Penn State last year who was getting first-team reps near the end of camp before he had an injury issue, was on the practice squad all year. A guy like that. A guy like Kobe Bryant, who in one piece of the mic'd up tape, Coach McDonald used Bryant to illustrate how he wants a certain drill to get done. And my goodness, the explosive lateral movement and agility of Kobe Bryant, the long speed was lacking, and maybe that's why he couldn't really stick on the outside like he did in college. But the move to safety, just really excited about his future and curious about how they could use him, along with Wallace and Rayshawn Jenkins, Julian Love. And then he was working a lot with Reek Woolen. There was one really cool little snippet in there where Woolen's doing a drill, and McDonald says, trust your speed, man. Trust your speed. That was such a great teaching point to see. And it also, for all the questions in the offseason about Reek Woolen and did he regress last year and issues in the run game, and could he possibly be a trade target? I think McDonald is excited to play with this guy and see what he can get out of him, and maybe help elevate him to that point of being a real lockdown press cover guy on the outside. Speaking of the outside as well, Devin Witherspoon, of course, we see him in all these videos running around 100% healthy. Last year he was dealing with a little hamstring issue at this time. And so, he didn't get to really ramp up until later in camp. Greg Bell, again, saw him play more outside yesterday than he did last week at this time, where he was playing more inside. So maybe that's just a little hint about how versatile they view him as and how they plan to use him. Number 3, where are the linebackers? We got some news yesterday that we weren't really expecting. Kind of expanding on news we got the week before about why Jerome Baker isn't out on the field. We knew that he was recovering from wrist surgery, but apparently he also has a knee or an ankle issue. Coach McDonald just referred to it as lower body. And he did sound pretty confident that, he'll be out here for camp, but we're not going to see him until then. And I did like how definitive that was. He didn't really hedge on that. We're not going to see him in OTAs, but he should be good for camp. Jerome Baker's a guy that they're counting on. He's the most experienced of that linebacker group that was completely flipped over, at least from a starting perspective, this offseason, bringing in him and Terrell Dotson on 1-year deals. They're also paying him the most in that group. Really need a healthy Jerome Baker. But Terrell Dotson is dealing with some things too. And that's one that he's been seen. He's been on the field. In fact, he's in the mic'd up segment for a moment. I think he's the one that asked Coach McDonald who picked the music. And did you pick the music And Coach McDonald said, you don't want to hear that. You don't want to see that. But neither of those guys are playing right now. And so your starting linebackers, if the Seahawks were to play a game today, would be John Radigan and Patrick O'Connell. Radigan, the Army grad who's, fourth year in the organization now, kind of worked his way up on special teams through the practice squad. He's got the fairly expensive tender this year. That shows the confidence they have in him. And then Patrick O'Connell, undrafted last year. And we loved what we saw from him. Before you panic, we loved what we saw from Patrick O'Connell in the preseason last year. Loved it. He led the team in tackles, I think, in a couple of those games, flying around, always around the ball. Just an undersized dude at just over 220 pounds. But I feel like every time we say that now, we should put $1 in a jar, right? And we're going to have a pretty nice little pile of cash after a while, because it's just kind of the way of the league, the way the league is trending these days. I don't know how many 240, 245 pound linebackers we're going to see anymore on the interior. And so, if you're concerned about that, about those two guys being your starting linebackers right now, I get it. I am too. Like, if we get to camp and Dodson and Baker aren't out there, then that becomes an issue. But also, it's an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity for a guy like O'Connell to make an impression. Maybe even a guy like Drake Thomas, who I haven't heard much about in this minicamp, but a guy that, when they poached him off the Raiders practice squad last year at the beginning of the season, that, a lot of us were very excited about. I think to this day, it's still my most viewed video of all time, because I just really, really liked him as a Mike, even though he's a little shorter, against the run, his tackling ability, his productivity. So it'll be interesting to see where he fits into this. And then it's an opportunity for Tyrese Knight, the 4th round draft pick out of UTEP, who has been a little bit of a polarizing prospect. There were some people who thought he was overdrafted, that he was a little too raw. We'll find out. Again, just a reminder that John Schneider has been pretty effusive in giving Mike Macdonald credit for that pick, that he deferred to him for that pick, that Macdonald saw something in Knight that he liked so much that they preferred him over Cedric Gray, who they could have had. They could have stayed put, not traded back in the 4th round and taken, or in the 3rd round, and taken Cedric Gray, where, right around where he was taken. They know the board well. They knew by moving back as far as they did in that deal that they would probably lose out on Cedric Gray. There were other guys on the board, and they clearly liked Knight the best. And so now we'll see. He's going to get more reps now, which is good. It's a good thing. Even though he's running with the 2s right now, gosh, if Dodson and Baker were out there, would he be running with the 3s behind those two, Radigan and O'Connell? He's going to get more reps now, and that can only help accelerate it. McDonald admitted that, the game is fast for him right now. The more reps he gets, the more that game is going to slow down. It's going to happen a little sooner. So it's I think linebacker is that one position that we're going to be watching the closest, kind of right up there with offensive line, interior offensive line anyway. As we head into camp, we're going to need some answers there. We're going to need some guys to get healthy for us to feel better about that. But that's where it's at right now. My 4th takeaway, and these are not in order of importance. They're just the order in which I happen to list them. And this might be the number 1 takeaway a lot of you have today, because it's been a big topic coming out of camp yesterday. But prepare for a potential Jackson Smith-Njigba breakout season in his sophomore year in 2025. Outstanding day yesterday. And I heard more than one person say, you don't often see dominating performances like this from a player in practice. The elite players do it. But it's pretty rare when a guy scores 7 total touchdowns combined between, he scored 5 touchdowns in the 11 on 11 and 3 more, or 2 more in the 7 on 7. 7 total touchdowns during those drills. That he was just, from all accounts, a dominant presence on the field yesterday. Now, a couple of qualifiers. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, you can't contest the ball. Reportedly, 3 of those touchdowns came against Devin Witherspoon, which, I can just hear some fans now like, oh, what? Huh? What our franchise corner is getting burned? Well, it's so much fun to me that those two 2023 first round draft picks going back and forth at each other. But also, we don't know. I haven't seen any video of any of these touchdowns to this point. Certainly any of the ones that came against Witherspoon, was he in position? Was he there to make a play? You cannot contest any passes in these practices, or you can get fined. You can have things. It's prohibited. And we know how physical of a player Devin Witherspoon is, and we know about his ball skills. Maybe, JSN doesn't score 7 touchdowns if you can contest throws. But just the fact that he's that comfortable in this offense so soon, and that skill is really starting to show. And then McDonald just raved about him afterwards. Just a great player. He's had a great offseason, and specifically highlighted his work ethic, which is not something necessarily that he was ever criticized for as someone who was lazy or didn't work hard, but just that there's a different level of learning how to be a pro, and the effort and the time and the commitment that it takes. And that, remember, this is a guy that missed an entire season leading into the draft and wasn't able to work out 100% throughout, an entire college season. And then even when he got here last year, then he broke his wrist and he had a setback there. That his work ethic has been absolutely outstanding, and that was exciting to hear. One other little side note to this is, so JSN scored 7 touchdowns. DK Metcalf not on the field, so that's a factor, right? So JSN becomes the focal point without DK there. DK's fine. He's there. He's not holding out or, could you blame him with all these wide receiver 2s getting paid like Jalen Waddle did yesterday? The ripple effect from some of these receiver contracts. We're going to see it. We're going to see it soon. Tyreek Hill may have an issue with that as well, it sounds like. But so far, it's not an issue for DK. He's there. He's just, these are voluntary workouts, but he's there on the field. He's just not taking part in these drills. Not all of them anyway. He has practiced intermittently. And so that's a factor. But also, all 7 of these touchdowns came from Geno Smith. And that speaks to his comfort level and how quickly he's picking up this Ryan Grubb offense. And I thought it was a fun quote from him in an interview he did after practice yesterday, that when asked about the playbook, that he said, "I'm learning plays I've never seen before." And that's notable because we know how much Geno bounced around the league and how many different schemes he had to learn in throughout his career before he got to Seattle. And even once he got to Seattle, had to relearn schemes a couple of times, right? So that's fun. That's exciting. Can't wait to see that playbook being opened up fully. So that just speaks to me, about the offensive install and kind of where we're at with that. And then my fifth takeaway, my final takeaway, is one that isn't necessarily something that I saw or heard that's coming from the field. But when I take what I'm seeing and hearing from the field, and then I look at the national perspective, I think is a storyline. I'm going to do a full episode diving into this topic sometime in the next week. But I'm wondering if the expectations for the Seahawks this year are too low. Because now we're getting to that time of season. It's a slower time to create content. You're having to see writers, not just podcasters, writers have to create content almost every day too, having to kind of dive into some more unique angles and different ways to look at things. And it's a necessary evil, but it's also fun, right? And so we're starting to see power rankings and projected standings and mock drafts and betting odds on where teams will finish in the draft order. That hit ESPN yesterday. And we're seeing list after list after list after list of player rankings and, top 32 offensive tackles in the league, top wide receiver duos in the league, a lot of PFF stuff like that coming out. The Seahawks are nowhere to be found. They're going to pick 11th in the draft, according to that piece. That indicates a poor season. They're being picked to finish 4th in the NFC West. Like, that's kind of become the trendy thing now, is all of a sudden people always love the new shiny toy, and the Arizona Cardinals are starting to get some buzz. And it's kind of become a trendy thing to pick the Seahawks to finish 4th. And I don't get it. And here's why. It has to be because it's just the unknown. New coaching staff. It's gonna take a while. There's gonna be a transition year. Okay. Well, the hire of McDonald and the guys that he hired on his staff universally were praised. I haven't seen a single analyst, reporter, anyone come out since the McDonald hire and say, wait a minute, I think this guy's going to bust. I think he's overrated. Nobody. The roster, in my opinion, and I know this opinion is shared by many, is so much better than it's been that I would ask it to you this way, and I'll let you chew on this for a little bit, and then we're going to come back. I might do this as a live so that I can get interaction. So I'm just spitballing here. Check my Twitter feed at Seahawks Forever coming up to Sunday evening. Maybe we'll go live Sunday, viewer interaction, Q&A, and get your thoughts on expectations. Because if Pete Carroll was still at the helm, think of it this way, a little thought exercise here. If Pete Carroll was still the head coach of the Seahawks right now, and they went out and they bolstered the offensive line, made the moves that they did to address an annual sore spot, right? In adding tons of bodies and talent to the guard position in Christian Haynes, one of the top guards in the draft, and Satawa Lamea and Anthony Bradford going into his second year, and you bring in a grizzled, reliable vet like Laken Tomlinson. And McClendon Curtis, who they carried on the roster all last year and kept singing the praises of, and now is running with the ones right now ahead of Haynes. They clearly like him. And then you go out and you hedge against potentially Abe Lucas not being there with a really solid vet like George Fant. So you address the offensive line. You have all those weapons back for some continuity on offense. And then on defense, you stack that defensive line, which has been a sore spot, again, for years. And one of the biggest sore spots last year, especially when it came to the run defense, you stack it. One of the deepest defensive lines in the league. And I'm not just the only one saying that. Some very, very well-respected and well-heard and well-read people out there saying the same thing. And then, that edge group, and you get Nwosu back, and then all that talent in the secondary. If that group with the exact same roster construction in this offseason came back this year with Pete Carroll again, vowing as he always does with all of his optimism that, we've tweaked the scheme. We know how to use these guys now. I've got the right bodies. Would they be being picked to finish last in the NFC West? No freaking way. I think they'd be a team with some buzz. And so I don't really get it, other than people don't know quite what to make of them, and they're not willing to stick their neck out in support of the Seahawks. Or maybe it's just that there's still that many people that just aren't sure about Geno Smith. Maybe it all comes back to the quarterback position, to which I would then retort, well, are those same people then that are picking Arizona third that sure about Kyler Murray? Because I've been pretty outspoken about how I don't think he's that dude. So I'm a little baffled by that, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts. I do think, and we'll cover this more in more detail and in more depth when we focus on this as a standalone subject. I do think Seahawks aren't going to have to go far if they want to put that chip on their shoulder, if they want something to be pissed off about, if they want bulletin board material. It's out there already. And as we get closer to the season, it's only going to grow, I think. And you put these lists up there, right? Hey, Tyler, DK, JSN, you guys aren't one of the top receiver combos in the league. What do you think about that? Right? Charles Cross, Abe Lucas, George Fant, you guys aren't one of the best tackle duos in the league. What do you think about that? Hey, Geno, look, this list has you as the 25th best quarterback in the league. Hey, guys, they're picking us to finish last. They say we're going to be a top 10 draft. We're going to have a top 10 draft pick next. It's not inconceivable that this team is going to have some really solid built-in motivation provided by from the outside as we get closer to the season. What do you think of all that stuff? Coming up as we roll into June, a couple of things to keep an eye out over the next couple of weeks. I'm going to break down the 2025 and 26 rosters, players that we know are under club control, under contract, and how the young roster starts to look and what some future needs might be. We'll also tie that in with, future salary caps and what those look like. Going to get some draft preview, 2025 mock draft at some point with Michael Thompson. Some players to kind of keep an eye on that might be fits for the Hawks and tie in with some of those needs that we'll spell out as we get into the college season. We'll get into some fantasy football, some outlook, how I think some guys are going to perform, maybe some guys that you might want to think about taking with the Seahawks. Bill Alvstead and Keith Myers of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast are going to join me on Monday, June 10th. We haven't locked down the format. We may do that one as a live show and get you guys involved as well. I think that might be kind of fun. We're going to do some things there. And then little plug, this coming Monday, so June 3rd, I'm going to be on the Hawks Nest podcast with Brandon Kane. He's been on my show a couple times. I'm sure you guys all know him and love him. Always love talking Seahawks and chopping it up with him. So we're going to go the other way. I'm going to be on his show on Monday. So keep an eye out for that as well. Until then, follow me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever. Forever and always go Hawks. Thanks for watching, you guys.